Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Today's Torah reading is Exodus 1:1 to 6:1, Isaiah 27:6 to 28:13, and also chapter 29, verses 22 to 23, and Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. So today we're going to look at the beginnings of three major moves of God and his instruments, the people that he used to bring them forth. And the first move is the deliverance of Israel from Egyptian bondage. Now this really signifies the transition of Israel from a group of people or a family to a nation. This is the beginning of that. And God's instrument to bring this about, we know, is Moses. So in our Torah portion today, we read all about the birth of Moses and how he came to be raised in the household of Pharaoh. And then he had to flee from Egypt because he killed an Egyptian. And then he spent many years in the land of Midian as a shepherd, and even took a wife there and started a family. Okay, then one day he sees a burning bush on Mount Horeb. Now Mount Horeb is also Mount Sinai. But this bush is not consumed, so he stops and he turns aside to check it out. And it's there he has a meeting with God, and his purpose as a shepherd of Israel is revealed. So I'm going to read Exodus chapter 3, verses 4 to 10. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." And he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I've also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." Now that is quite a mission. However, Moses is not really sure about all this, and he presents to God a whole series of concerns, of questions and reasons why not. And the first thing he says is, "Who am I?" And God says, "Don't worry, I'll be with you." Then in verse 13, Moses says to God, "If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" So God speaks at length to him, reassures him, and he reiterates the promise of deliverance. Then we read in chapter 4, verse 1. Then Moses answered, "But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.'" So God responds to Moses, and he gives him three miraculous signs to show to the people. But again, chapter 4, verses 10 to 12. "But Moses said to the Lord, 'O my Lord, I am not eloquent either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue.' Then the Lord said to him, 'Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seen or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak.'" So what does Moses then say? He says, "Oh my Lord, please send someone else." Now you'd think at this point God would say, okay, I'll send somebody else, but he doesn't. He's a little angry, but he doesn't turn away from Moses, but rather he does make a concession, and he sends Moses a helper, his brother Aaron. And so he silences all of Moses' excuses. Now, why does God do this? Why doesn't he just get someone else? Now, I think it's because God has created and prepared Moses all his life for this particular task. And Moses has a humble heart. We read that in Numbers 12 about Moses being the meekest man on earth. And also, Moses would never take, God knew that Moses wouldn't take the glory for himself. So, to me, Moses' reluctance to say yes to the task really showed an awareness of his inability not to do the work that God is telling him to do. And it wasn't rebellion. Because we know also Moses is described later in Deuteronomy. It says, "And there has not arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, none like him for all the signs and wonders that the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt." So God does not expect perfection in his people, the instrument he uses for his promises, and nor does he really seek it. So let's move forward now about 750 years to the time of Isaiah. Okay, now the move reflected here is the beginning of exile. Now we know Israel was brought into the promised land through Moses and Joshua a long time ago, but since then they had fallen into apostasy and corruption to such an extent that God had to start warning them to turn back to him or else face exile. So enter the prophet Isaiah. Now Isaiah is known as one of the greatest Hebrew prophets alongside Moses and Elijah, and his prophetic ministry occurred from about 739 to 700 BC. Now, we know he wasn't perfect, for in chapter 6, as he sees a vision of the Lord, he says, "Woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips." However, he was very humble in this confession, and he was a submitted servant of God, and therefore he obeyed God to bring a very difficult message to the people, one they didn't want to hear. So I'm going to read chapter 27, verses 9 to 11. Isaiah chapter 27, verses 9 to 11. "Therefore by this the guilt of Jacob will be atoned for, and this will be the full fruit of the removal of his sin, when he makes all the stones of the altars like chalk stones crushed to pieces. No asherim or incense altars will remain standing. For the fortified city is solitary, a habitation deserted and forsaken like the wilderness. There the calf grazes, there it lies down and strips its branches. When its boughs are dry, they are broken. Women come and make a fire of them. For this is a people without discernment. Therefore he who made them will not have compassion on them. He who formed them will show them no favor." So this passage speaks of judgment and indicates the signs of judgment. Like all the Asherim pagan altars will be completely ruined on the mountains, and the fortified city will be desolate. This could be many fortified cities, or many people think that this refers to specifically Jerusalem. And this is all because the people would not listen, they would not understand, and so turn away from sin. So God therefore finally says he would not show any further compassion on this particular group of people. And we know that exile ensues. We know that the northern kingdom gets exiled by Assyria in 722 BC. This is in the time of Isaiah. And later on, the southern kingdom gets exiled at 586 BC. However, God does not leave them with those as final words. Okay, I'm going to continue to read in verses 12 and 13. It says, "In that day, from the river Euphrates to the brook of Egypt, the Lord will thresh out the grain, and you will be gleaned one by one, O people of Israel. And in that day a great trumpet will be blown, and those who were lost in the land of Assyria, and those who were driven out to the land of Egypt will come and worship the Lord on the holy mountain at Jerusalem." So he leaves them with a promise of restoration after exile. So we're going to go forward in time again about another 700 years to Matthew. And I'm going to read Matthew chapter 2. I'm going to read, I'll read the whole thing from 1 to 12. "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men came from the east, came to Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him.' When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, 'In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.' Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, 'Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him.' After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream now not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way." So this is actually the beginning of a move of restoration. the restoration of all things. Now here God's instrument is also submitted, but in this case, he is also the perfect servant, the Son of God, Yeshua. We see very humble beginnings in this. Yet the visit of the Magi to worship him foreshadows the coming glory of Yeshua as King of Kings. So we have the beginnings of 3 moves and 3 servants who submitted to God as instruments to his plan. Moses submitted to God, brought deliverance from Egypt, the beginning of the nation. Isaiah submitted to God, brought truth, a very difficult truth, bringing exile. But the ultimate instrument, God's own Son, Jesus, brought restoration, which is still ongoing, through submission unto death. So we're not Moses, we're not Isaiah, and we're certainly not Jesus. But we have all been created in such a way to participate in the moves of God today. Now, it's okay if we feel apprehensive like Moses. Okay, we're all human, we're not perfect. But God will be your greatest encourager. He's not calling us to be perfect. But he will and has through Jesus provide any element of perfection that we need to do what he's calling us to do. So he's not calling us to be perfect, but what he is calling us to be is submitted. Thank you. Amen.